What will drive a woman to insanely murder her husband and serve up his body as a dish to her children? That is the topic of today's episode, where we take a look at the life of Katherine Knight, the first woman to be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in Australia. She skinned her husband after stabbing him to death, then fried up parts of his body with the intent to feed them to her clueless children. She was even said to have arranged the dining table and used place cards to direct her kids to their seats, all in preparation to eat the body of their father. Buckle up, folks, because we're about to go on the wild ride that was the life of Katherine Knight. Please note that this narrative is provided for educational purposes only. And while you're here, hit that like, subscribe, and share buttons. Your support ensures I continue to create more content. Thank you. Katherine Knight was a woman born in Tenterfield in New South Wales, Australia in 1955. She was the youngest of 5 children and had a traumatic childhood. Her father, Ken Knight, was an alcoholic who frequently physically and emotionally abused his wife in front of their children. As a result, Katherine and her siblings grew up in a highly abusive and violent environment. There were claims that she was abused by several male members of her family. However, this type of abuse wasn't committed by her father. Having no good role models, Knight would sometimes complain to her mother that some of her partners want her to perform sexual acts she doesn't want to participate in. Her mother would tell her to put up with it and stop complaining. Despite the abuse, Knight was considered a good student and a talented athlete, particularly in the sport of netball. She left school at the age of 15 and took a job in a clothing factory. Shortly after, she met and married her first husband, David Kellett. The marriage was short-lived and they separated after having 2 children together. Her first marriage was said to be very abusive and violent. Knight would often start fights with Kellett and on one occasion hit him across the head with a frying pan. This happened while Knight was pregnant with their first child. Kellett, fearing for his life, fled the scene to their neighbor's house, where he collapsed in a pool of blood on getting there. He was rushed to the hospital and treated for a fractured skull. Knight somehow managed to get Kellett to drop the charges against her, and the couple continued to live together until she got pregnant with her second child. Unable to cope with the numerous abuses he suffers at her hands, Kellett left Knight for another woman and the marriage collapsed. After the birth of her second child, Knight was seen the very next day violently pushing the child's pram from side to side with the baby still in it. When neighbors caught wind of this, they took her to the hospital where she was diagnosed with postpartum depression. 2 months later, Knight would strap her 2-month-old baby to a railway track shortly before a train was due. She left her baby there and stole an axe, waving it around, threatening to kill passers-by. Luckily, a homeless man saw what was happening and rescued the baby right on time before the train passed. Again, Knight was arrested and taken to the hospital. She signed herself out of the hospital the very next day and continued her erratic behaviors. No sooner was she released from the hospital that she hijacked a car with a woman in it. She slashed the woman's face and demanded that she take her to find Kellett. The woman managed to escape and called the police. By the time the police arrived, Knight has taken another hostage. This time, she held a young person hostage with a knife held across his neck, threatening to kill him. The police were able to disarm her and take her to a psychiatric hospital, where she was admitted for nearly 3 months. When police informed Kellett of the incident, he left his new girlfriend and moved to Aberdeen to support Knight. A few years later, they had another child, but by this time, Knight was already fed up with the relationship and decided to call it quits with Kellett and ended their marriage for good. Katherine Knight's second marriage was to a man named David Saunders. They met in 1986, and within a few months of meeting, the couple moved in together. Even though they lived together, it was said that Saunders still kept his old apartment, and Knight was not very happy about this. This became a source of argument between them. She would often throw him out of their shared apartment, and when he leaves, she would follow him and beg him to return. The relationship became so tumultuous that Knight, one day in a fit of rage, slit the throat of Saunders' puppy right before his eyes. She told him this was what would happen to him if he ever decides to cheat on her. In the same breath, she took a frying pan and, in a similar manner to her first husband, she knocked Saunders unconscious with it. It seemed Knight just couldn't help herself when it comes to abusing her partners. The couple had a daughter together, but the baby did not seem to mellow Knight down one bit. The last straw for Saunders was when, after an argument, Knight hit him in the face with an iron before stabbing him in the stomach with a pair of scissors. Saunders left and went into hiding from Knight. He was able to obtain a restraining order against her, and so ended their relationship. Knight went ahead and started another relationship soon afterwards with a man named John Chillingworth. They had a baby together, but the relationship only lasted 3 years. It was during this time that Knight began a relationship with John Price, a father of 3 who worked in the local abattoir. Price was known for his hard-working nature and was well liked by his co-workers. However, his relationship with Katherine Knight was tumultuous. As with her other relationships, the couple fought frequently. Knight at one point wanted Price to marry her, but he wasn't so sure that was the right thing to do. In a fit of rage, Knight got Price fired from his job by videotaping items she claimed Price stole from his company. She sent the videotape to the company that he worked at for over 17 years, and this got him fired. He kicked her out of their shared apartment after this debacle. However, a few months later, the pair restarted their relationship for reasons that was difficult to fathom. This time around, the relationship was even more tumultuous than before, with both parties exhibiting violent tempers. On February the year 2000, after one of their numerous fights, Knight stabbed Price in the chest. He decided there and then that enough was enough and finally kicked her out of the house for good. He took out a restraining order against Knight on his way to work on February 29, 2000. This he did in an attempt to save himself and his children from Knight. He told his co-workers that if he did not show up to work the next day, it would be because he had been murdered by Knight. Alarmed, his co-workers tried to persuade him to not go home that evening, but he had his kids to think of and wanted them to be safe. He said that he's afraid Knight might kill his kids if he did not go home to protect them. Later that evening, Price got home and noticed that Knight had sent the kids for a sleepover at a friend's house. He then spent the rest of the evening at a neighbor's house. When Price went home that evening, Knight was already waiting for him at home. It was not exactly clear what happened soon afterwards. Some reports claim that Knight seduced Price and then stabbed him multiple times while he slept. Others said that the couple got into a heated argument when Price refused to have sex with her, leading to Knight stabbing him multiple times. She then skinned him and hung the skin on a meat hook in the living room. She decapitated him and cooked up parts of his body, serving it with baked potato, carrot, pumpkin, cabbage, and gravy. She then arranged the dining table to have the names of each of her kids on a plate directly in front of the seats. The next day, Katherine Knight sent a series of disturbing letters to Price's children, which included details about their father's murder and photos of his skinned body. Meanwhile, the neighbor that Price spent the evening with the previous day was concerned when he saw that Price's car was still parked in the driveway the next afternoon. When he did not show up to work, his employer sent someone to go check up on him to make sure he's okay. The neighbor and his co-worker arrived at the same time and started knocking on the door, attempting to wake him up, but they were alarmed when they saw blood on his front door. The police were alerted and arrived at the scene, where they found Price's body, which had been decapitated and hung from a meat hook. Knight was immediately suspected as the culprit, given her history. She was arrested and charged with murder. Knight's mental state was a significant factor in the trial. She had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by intense and unstable relationships, impulsive behavior, and a distorted sense of self. Her defense team argued that her mental illness had played a significant role in her actions and that she should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. However, the prosecution argued that while Katherine Knight may have had mental health issues, she was still fully aware of her actions and the consequences they would have. They also presented evidence that Katherine had planned the murder in advance, including buying the knife she used to stab Price. After a highly publicized trial, Katherine Knight was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is currently serving her sentence at the Silverwater Women's Correctional Center in New South Wales. The murder of John Price by Katherine Knight was a shocking and gruesome crime that shocked the small town of Aberdeen. It goes to show the dangers of domestic violence and the need for better support and resources for victims. It also raised questions about the role of mental illness in violent crimes and the responsibility of the individual for their actions, regardless of their mental states. Until next time, humans, stay safe out there.